Welcome to Show Me the Cost, a look at costs in manufacturing. Our agenda for today is first we'll do an intro and take care of some housekeeping items. Then we'll do a look into setup and discussing cost structure. We'll look at what makes up costs, what's important about the structure of costs. Then we'll take a look at viewing some production costs and some production variances after that. Then we'll spend a little bit of time at the very end or towards the end of looking at the cost administration workspace. It's kind of a one-stop shop for costing, if you will, in finance and operations. And finally, we'll wrap it up with some other housekeeping items and some final thoughts. Before we get started, a copy of the recording will be available after the event through the same event link. And we'll take time for questions and comments throughout the session in the chat pane. And then tell us how we did at the post-event survey, and we'll send you a small thank you gift. We'd like to hear feedback on how we did and what we can do better. Thanks. As far as presenter, that will be me, Dan Liebel. I'm a senior consultant. I've been with Stone Ridge since 2015. And as far as costing, it's a kind of near and dear to my heart. I know it's a pain in a lot of businesses, but it's I consider it a very important part of the business. It's a very important step to do. Is if your costing isn't correct, it's going to have some unwanted, severe, detrimental consequences for the business, however you want to word that. Because if you don't have it costed well, then the price for the product is going to be incorrect, and then margins are not going to be what you think they should be, et cetera, et cetera. And finding the correct material, labor, and overhead mix and portions and what they should be for each product is important. Because the goal is, are we making money, right? Now, let's get into the demo portion of things. First, we're going to take a look at viewing the setups and how to structure the costs and look at some items to see how they can flow through. Then we'll take a look at the production cost and the production variances. And then finally, we'll wrap it up with taking a deeper look into the cost administration workspace. So let's switch over. We're going to start with the cost sheet. This is where in a standard cost environment, which is what this is about. Manufacturing is primarily a standard cost environment for a cost type. And in general, most companies will have the material, labor, and overhead portions. Sometimes you can see that breakout, sometimes you cannot. Depending on if you're in a FIFO environment, you're not able to see that breakout. But in a standard cost environment, you can define it how you want it broken out. And that's what's really cool about the cost sheet. So we have material, and then we'll have labor, and you have overhead, and we'll walk through each one of those different steps. So on the material, the item that we're going to be dealing with today is a standard or a standard speaker with a cabinet. So we're going to have some electronic components, some cabinet components, and some miscellaneous components. And if I highlight one of these nodes, you can see that in the name we have it structured. And I guess going back to the cost of conversion means the production side of things. There's also cost of purchase cost sheet that you can set up. But since we're a manufacturing conference, we'll defer that to another discussion. So we can see the electronic components have a cost group assigned to them as M1. When we get to the BOM in a few minutes, we can show how that's assigned to the item. And the cabinets components obviously are the M2, miscellaneous, the M3, et cetera. For the labor portion, again, it's using the cost group. And we have the different operations that I guess essentially that we have on our routes. And each one of those got a different node in the cost sheet setup. So we've identified a cost group for each of the packaging, or for each of the operations on the list to the left. And the way they're assigned is not via a item, but it's set up on the routes. We're going to be assigning cost categories to a specific operation on a route, and that cost category has the cost group tied to it, as well as that cost category also has the rate that we're going to be charging. So on a route step, so on our assembly set, let's say the rate is $50 an hour. And on that step in the route on our particular item, we might have a half an hour. That means we're going to have $25 of labor assigned to that product. And then the same for packaging. And we have a sub-assembly that's going to have the Q&A, or the quality and assurance, assigned to it. When we get down to the overhead, because we're in a sample company, they have 3 examples of overhead that you can assign to products. So the first is based off of the machine depreciation or plant overhead, and that one is unit based. So if we go to the rate, it's get to our slider. If we get over here, it's $1.50 per unit. So every unit that we produce gets $1.50 of machine depreciation or plant overhead. The next overhead is the material overhead, and that is based off of our total material cost. When we get to the surcharge area, in our site 1, which is the site that we're going to be dealing with today, we have 3%. So 3% of our total material cost is going to go to our overhead, applied overhead for material. And last, and the most common type of overhead, is the labor overhead. So this one is based off of our labor process time. And for each process step, we have 2% labor applied to it. So that's kind of the makeup. You can define these costs however you want. Primarily, you're going to see more variety in the material. The project I just came off of, they made pipe, and they wanted to see and track the cost for the resins, because the resin mix was important to the cost of the product. And it was also, given the economic times of the last couple of years, it's been pretty volatile. So it's been more like a commodity than a standard product. So we broke it off with its own cost group. Let's move on to an item. And our top level product is going to be the standard speaker upsell demo, D0023. Let's start taking a look at the BOM. And generally I go through the BOM versions, but for purposes of visualization, it's easier to look at the designer to see the formula of the particular item. So we have the cabinet and the standard speaker, but underneath each one of those is the components that make up that cabinet and that make up that speaker. So if we drill back on the wiring harness, we can go back. And for those of you not familiar with finance and operations or D365, anywhere you see the blue, it's a drill back to more information or to a different form. So we go down to our manage costs fast tab. Here we go. And we can see that the cost group M3 is assigned to this wiring harness. So let's back out. Let's go take a look at the route. And our route has 4 steps. So once 10 is complete, it goes to 20, et cetera, et cetera. We have assembly, finishing, testing, and packaging. And if we would drill back on the assembly, just to kind of show you how the routes are, we have a costing resource, but we have the setup category. So if we drill back on our runtime, our cost category, you can see that we have that L2 cost group assigned to it, and our cost price is $25 an hour in this case. So on this one, because it's a quarter of an hour, it's about 6 1/4 for each hour produced that we have, or for each item that we produce, because it's $25 an hour. A quarter of that is 6 1/4. Pretty straightforward so far. So let's take a look at our costs. So if we go into our Manage Cost tab, Item Price, we have the active price and the pending price. So you can view you can do view calculation details on pending prices as well if you're rolling up and getting a new cost. That way you can compare previous to actual. So if we look at view calculation details on this, let's first start with the costing sheet. So this is our top level. We have, because our subassemblies are both assigned to the cost group M9, they're rolled up together into this 31707. Then we have our labor, because we have labor on the route. So we have our packaging and assembly. The other two steps probably didn't have any labor assigned, or they were assigned to these same two. We'd have to look to get deeper into it. But I believe that was the case. And then our 3 overheads that we discussed before. So the 150 unit based, the 826 based on to the 3%. And for those of you out there thinking, hey, 317 times 3, it should be over $9, right? Well, it's based off of just the material portion of those components. So, and then the same with the labor overhead. So 2% of the labor. Oh, missed us. Let's take a look at the overview as well. Close that too quick. So we have our top level, which is level 0, and then we have level 1 with the 1 subassembly, the cabinet. And if we go further down, we have the level 1 with our speaker subassembly. And if we go further down, we can see those 4 operations that we had with the labor codes. So the cost group there, I guess the 3 of them were all assigned to that assembly, or the packaging labor cost group. And then we have our 3 overheads that we saw. And you can look at the level 2 as well. So underneath the level 1 is all the level 2 cost. Again, we have the different cost groups for each of the different levels. So far, so good. Let's take a look at the MO3, just to kind of look at, that's a different view. You can get, that detail can get kind of busy when you have multi-levels. So let's take a look at the costs on this standard speaker through the view calculation details. And let's take a look at the costing sheet. So here we have more breakouts. So it totals up the material. We have the electronic, the cabinet components, and the miscellaneous components broken out. And then same with, on this one, they had used the Q&A cost category on the Q&A, or the testing operation. And then again, the 3 overheads as we expected. That said, so let's take a look at production costs. This is the workspace, but we'll come back to this. Part of the reason I wanted to go here is because you can see that there's a link to production orders, and it's kind of a trimmed down window from what you would see if you went to an actual production order window. It just has all of the has a lot of the stuff that you would see on there, but the production order itself has, it's kind of a trimmed down version. So let's take a look at production order 1010. This one, we had 25 finished goods that we wanted to get out of it. However, there were 5 wire harnesses that we had to issue additional to this because we found 5 that didn't make it through testing for whatever reason. They got through the first round of tests, but not the second. So I like to start by looking at the production posting. And this gives you a listing of all your journals. Well, before I go there, for costing information and things related to cost, the view has all of your journals, and then the manage cost pretty much has everything else. That's the only 2 tabs that I usually use when I get into this costing mode. But I like to start with production posting because it kind of gives you the GL info. So if we went into the voucher, you'd see the journal entry that made for each line. So again, you highlight the line and go to the voucher. So the material would be your pick list. The route consumption journal is going to be your labor. And a lot of times there's going to be labor and overhead in the indirect and the route consumption. The indirect has your overhead posting. Report is finished, or RAF, as we like to say. RAF is the finished good going into inventory at its standard cost. The costing line is basically the actual costs that were incurred during that production run. So it has, the standard cost, and then it'll have whatever additional variances. So like the extra 5 wire harnesses, any extra labor that we had to do because we had to replace those wire harnesses would be included in that. And that would also be included in some of the route consumption too. So let's go back out. We'll take a look at that pick list. So let's go over to the view and look at our picking list because we had 3 lines. If you remember the formula, we just had the 2 sub-assemblies that were in there. But here's our 5 wire harnesses that we had to pull into it. So that brings us back here. We might want to take a look at, you can also go into the view calculation details. Again, you can view the costing sheet. This gives us the breakout of the costing sheet, just like we saw before. But let's take a look at the variances. So in this case, a couple things stick out. So we have the labor. We have a huge variance on our substitution labor. But if we looked at the view calculation details or the transaction details, which we'll get to in a moment, we had different costing resources. And you can tell that when we click the details here. So we had, I'm not sure if it gives us the exact number of the costing resource on here. Nope, it didn't. But yes, our route had a costing resource of 2010 or something similar, and I believe we actually used 2011 for the costing resource. So it perceived that as a substitution because you used a different resource. It technically could have a different cost to it, so it's ruled as a substitution. And the same with the others. And because we have overhead associated with the labor, that also rolled down into our 2% labor entry. The quantity variance was based on the material because we used 5 additional wiring harnesses. We had some additional overhead, so that incurred additional variance there. And the price variance on the M9 is based on the fact that I didn't roll up my cost on the sub-assemblies before I did the production order for that top level. So there was a difference in price on those. And if we look at, we'll go into the view calculation details. Nope. Yeah, let's look at, yeah, we'll look at the view calculation details. And we'll go into our overview costing. So on this, it shows you the estimated and realized um, consumed, which is the quantities, estimated consumed, realized consumed, and your estimated cost and realized cost. So the estimated numbers are related to based on the formula and the route that it saw up front. When you did when you released that production order, it looked at the standard and what the route set up, multiplied times the quantity, and got what should have been consumed. The realized cost is what you actually did consume on that particular product. So if we go down here further, we'll see should see our 5 wiring harnesses. Oh, here it is way at the bottom. Um, so that's what those fields do. Let's go back. Let's take a look at one other. This is another similar situation. We had 30 on our production order, but we had to utilize 10 mid-range speaker units. We needed an additional 10. So let's start off by going to our pick list again and see our 10 wiring harnesses. You can hover over it and then you get the tooltip to tell you what the name is to save real estate for all of the numbers that you need to populate in here. A lot of times you will populate these with your, you'll add the dimensions to include your inventory dimensions, such as site, warehouse, location, if you're using bins, et cetera, et cetera. So let's go, since we've validated that, let's go to our cost. We'll take a look at our production posting. Again, we have our material consumption. There was no labor because that was a mistake on my end because I didn't realize there were no times on the route. There was a route, but there were no times. So I added those and then did that other work order, the 1010. But that's why there's no labor here. And then our RAF and our 2 overheads, and then our costing because we had to use that additional. We have these variances, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so let's then take a few minutes and take a look at, let's take a look at one more, 991. This one we had 25 that we did it for, although we only RAF'd or reported as finished 24, and we had an error of 1. So let's take a look at our RAF journal. So we have the good quantity, we had an error cause. We didn't enter in an error cause. But anyway, it was probably damaged or whatever be the case. I should have entered in an error cause there. So let's take a look at our costs. In our production posting, you see the error quantity listed here. So it's going to be included in our component or our material consumption for our pick list. And we can have our costing that'll include all of the variances as well. So if we take a look to dig deeper into those, we do our calculation details, our overview costing. We have our realized and our estimated consumption and our realized consumption. Because we had the one that was an error, it still was a realized consumption. We still did consume that material and labor, et cetera, on those. And then if we take a look at our variances, we have that M3, which is the the mid-range speaker unit that we did. Because we substituted those, we did have those on our original one. And then we have the quantity variance on here because we didn't complete all 25. We only came out with 24, so we were short one essentially. So that's pretty much it. So let's take a look at our cost administration workspace. First is the summary. Generally, these are tiles. If you take a look at the workspace list, there's this is costing, but there's a number of other workspaces that are out there by default when you install it. You can modify these. You can make them your own. You can delete things. You can create your own workspace if you want to. If you don't like the cost administration, want to custom build your own, you can do that as well. But anyway, these tiles here are basically exemption tiles that these first two are. The last is, this third one is kind of a link to inventory close, which is kind of a handy tool. So the all release products to configure means there's a number of items that don't have a cost group assigned to them because this is a sample environment. There's FIFO items, weighted average, moving average items that don't need or don't require a cost group. So that's the reason for so many errors in this sample environment. The other one is this 98 release products with no active cost. So this is a very handy one in a standard cost environment because it's going to list the items that don't have a cost. So it would be good to, you can click on these tiles and it'll take you to the details behind them. So these are all the items, and glancing through these, a number of these again are FIFO, but here regardless, it's going to show any items that don't have a standard cost. The backflush costing is a lean environment tile, so not familiar with the lean, but I know backflushing is a key component of lean, so I suppose that's an important tile for a lean environment. You have these other the pending working statements you can add to this list as well. I'm not sure if any of these have anything. These are the same as the two tiles that we just looked at above, but instead of a tile with a number and a count, which is really nice, it's just showing all of the numbers. So you can scroll through and clicking on one of these tiles will open up that specific item card that you can go in and then fix that issue. As we go down the list, there's a job order costing. These are just some graphs that you can look at. You can add to it. Let's go back down. We lost our spot. There's a Power BI, which isn't enabled in my environment, but that's all the rage nowadays is the Power BI, and rightfully so. And then at the very bottom are links to specific pages that are cost related or cost specific. So the costing version, the cost sheets that we were looking at earlier, the cost categories that I showed you earlier, and costing versions and calculation groups are also another important part of the cost roll up part. But outside of the scope of what we're talking about today, links to inventory value reports, so you can find an inventory aging, ABC classifications, some manufacturing reports, and also a link to the production posting, which it's just a huge posting journal with the different production orders listed in it. That's pretty much it. It's a one-stop shop for costing. You pretty much anything that you want to do related to costing, you can do in here. You have a link to your released products. And if you have a mixture of different types of, if you're using bombs and formulas, then you would use batch orders for the formulas. The production flows is the lean production. And I believe this is a link to an inventory. Oh, it's the on-hand list. So you can have a link to that or create that. That said, let's go back to our PowerPoint to wrap things up. Um, and outside of doing costing, we also have a number of other services that we do for customers and clients, upgrades and migrations, technology services or IT, business intelligence that I mentioned before, BI, um, project recovery, training and support, product road mapping guidance, licensing, implementations, integration projects, even organizational change management. We have step 4. So if you are connected already and want to stay connected, or if you're new and want to get connected, you can follow us on LinkedIn to see upcoming events and webinars. You can also go to our website and check out our resources page to also find more links to educational content. We do a number of blogs. There's a number of blogs that have been out there over the years. And don't forget again to tell us how we did in a post-event survey. We like to hear that feedback. If there's any questions, any further questions, feel free to reach out, or if you think of something later on today or after this event, feel free to send me an email and I'll answer the question or find somebody that can answer your question. Thank you.